The rain came sideways through Buckhead, turning Peachtree Road into a river of headlights and brake lights. Zara Caldwell stood outside the service entrance of Hanwoo House, the most expensive Korean barbecue restaurant in Atlanta, and knocked for the third time. Her gray hoodie had soaked through 40 minutes ago. She was 29 years old. The last time she'd eaten was a gas station protein bar split in half yesterday morning. The service door opened. A stocky man in chef whites looked her up and down the way people look at stray dogs, pity chased immediately by irritation. "We're not hiring." "I haven't told you what I can do." Zara kept her voice level. She'd learned that desperation made people say no faster. "Dishes, prep, bussing, grease traps. I'll do anything in the back of house. You don't have to put me on payroll the first week." Trial run. If I can't keep up, I walk and you owe me nothing. The chef scratched his jaw. Owner's upstairs in the private dining room with family tonight. Bad night for noise at the back door. Come back Monday. He closed the door gently, which was worse than a slam. A slam gave you something to push against. Zara pressed her back against the brick wall and slid down until she was sitting on the wet concrete. The dumpster 10 feet away smelled like sesame oil and garlic, and her stomach cramped so hard her vision went white at the edges. She pressed her fists against her abdomen, breathing through the wave. 8 months since Grady Memorial Hospital had revoked her nursing license. 8 months since Dr. Felicia Grant had walked into that disciplinary hearing with manufactured documentation proving that Zara, not Grant herself, had administered the wrong heparin dosage to 72-year-old Dolores Webb. Dolores had died on a Tuesday morning. Someone had to pay for it. Between a third-year attending with a connected family and a black trauma nurse from Vine City, the calculation had been simple. She'd spent her savings fighting, then her emergency fund, sold her car, lost her apartment. 8 months from Dean's List scholar and double-shift trauma nurse to a woman who couldn't get hired to wash dishes. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Settle in because this story doesn't hold back. And if you've been here before, you already know. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's get back to it. She wiped her face with a soaked sleeve, accomplishing nothing. The women's shelter on Cortlandt had a 2-week waiting list. She could try. A sound cut through the rain, high-pitched, thin. The kind of sound that bypassed her ears entirely and went straight into the part of her brain that 11 years of emergency medicine had wired for exactly this frequency. A child was choking. Zara was on her feet before the thought finished forming. The sound came from above, second floor, window cracked open 2 inches. She grabbed the service door handle. Locked. Kicked the lock plate with her boot heel. It gave on the second try. She ran through a kitchen of shouting cooks, past a prep station, through a swinging door, up a staircase, following the sound the way a dog follows scent. Not with thought, but with something older and more reliable. The private dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows and a table set for 20. Only 4 people were in the room. An older Korean woman in emerald silk was screaming. 2 men in dark suits had frozen mid-reach toward a small body convulsing in a chair too big for her. And a man was on his knees beside the child, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't get the cap off an EpiPen. Zara crossed the room in 4 strides. The child, 5, maybe 6, female, lips blue, hives across neck and forearms, throat swelling. Classic anaphylaxis. On the table, a blood glucose monitor and insulin pen case. This child was also type 1 diabetic. "Give me that." She took the EpiPen from the man's hands, registered his face for half a second. Sharp jaw, thin scar from left ear to chin, eyes so dark they looked black, then stopped seeing him entirely because the child was dying. She popped the blue cap, pressed the orange tip against the child's outer thigh through her dress, held for 10 seconds. The girl's body jerked. Zara watched her throat, her chest, her nail beds. Call 911. Anaphylaxis in a pediatric patient with type 1 diabetes. EpiPen administered. Patient is responding but needs monitoring for a biphasic reaction. One suited man was already on the phone. The older woman had stopped screaming and was staring at Zara with an expression that mixed shock with something colder. The man on the floor hadn't moved. He was staring at his daughter. Obviously his daughter. Same sharp cheekbones, same small chin, with the horror of a parent who just watched their child almost die while their hands failed. She's breathing, Zara said directly to him. Not, she'll be fine. That was a promise no honest nurse makes. But she's breathing was a fact. A handhold. Her throat's opening up. The EpiPen is working. But epinephrine will spike her glucose. With the type 1, we need to monitor. Do you have her correction factor? He blinked. Her what? Where's her glucometer? He pointed. Zara checked. 243 and climbing. The girl needed insulin, but the dose had to be precise for a child this small. What's her name? Yuna. His voice was rough gravel. Her name is Yuna. Zara touched the girl's face. Skin warm, hives fading. Yuna, my name is Zara. You're going to be okay. I need you to stay very still. Can you do that? Enormous dark eyes focused on Zara, glassy with fear. But she nodded. Good girl, you're very brave. Zara looked at the man. Her endocrinologist's name, now. Dr. Kwon, Children's Healthcare. Call the after-hours line. Glucose is 243 and rising post-EpiPen. We need her correction factor and whether to bolus before paramedics arrive. He pulled a phone from his suit jacket. His hands were steadier now. Having tasks helped. People fell apart when they had nothing to do. The paramedics arrived 11 minutes later. Zara gave them vitals, timeline, interventions, medication history. The clipped language of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The lead EMT did a double take. You a nurse? I was. In the ambulance, Yuna's fingers curled around Zara's wrist and didn't let go. Jae-sun sat across from her, watching. The panic in his eyes had been replaced by something calculating and patient. You kicked down my door, he said. Your lock was cheap. You saved my daughter's life. Anaphylaxis is treatable if you catch it fast. What is your name? Zara Caldwell. I am Park Jae-sun. He said it like it should mean something. From the way the EMTs avoided his eyes, maybe it did. Why were you outside my restaurant? I was looking for work. He studied her soaked hoodie, her raw knuckles, her steady hands. I don't think I need to give you work, Zara Caldwell. I think I need something else entirely. The ambulance turned into Eggleston Children's Hospital. As Yuna was wheeled away, Zara stopped at the ER threshold. No insurance, no ID, no business being inside a hospital. She couldn't afford to breathe in, but Park Jae-sun's hand touched the small of her back, briefly, almost impersonally, and guided her through the doors. Stay, he said, please. The word didn't come naturally to him. Zara could hear that.
And Yuna's grip was still on her wrist, small fingers holding on like Zara was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to kill her. She stayed. Yuna was admitted to the pediatric ward at 11 that night. The doctors confirmed what Zara already knew. Biphasic anaphylaxis was a risk for 12 to 24 hours, and the glucose spike had required careful insulin management. The girl was sleeping now, her small chest rising and falling beneath hospital blankets, an IV taped to the back of her hand. Zara sat in the hallway on a plastic chair,
her wet clothes slowly drying in the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. She was shivering. Her hoodie smelled like alley and rain and medical-grade hand sanitizer. She should leave. She had no reason to still be here. The child was stable, the father had resources, and Zara's presence in a hospital was a cruel joke that life was playing on her. But she hadn't moved. Partly because she had nowhere to go, partly because something about the way that little girl's fingers had gripped her wrist had cracked open a door inside her that she'd spent 8 months bricking shut. Pak Jae-sun appeared at the end of the hallway at midnight. He'd changed his suit jacket, which told Zara that someone had brought him a fresh one, which told her that someone was available at midnight to bring him a fresh suit jacket, which told her more about who this man was than anything he could say. He carried 2 paper cups of coffee. He held one out to her without ceremony and sat in the plastic chair beside hers. For a full minute, neither of them spoke. They drank hospital coffee and listened to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beep of monitors. Yuna's mother died during childbirth, he said. No preamble, no easing into it, just the fact laid on the floor between them. Placental abruption. They saved Yuna, but not me young. That was 5 years ago. Since then, I have had 11 nannies. 3 quit when they learned about my business. 4 couldn't handle Yuna's medical needs, the diabetes, the allergies, the emergency protocols. 2 were stealing. 1 hit my daughter when she thought the cameras weren't recording. The 11th lasted 8 months. She left 3 weeks ago because her boyfriend gave her an ultimatum. Zara wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. The warmth was the closest thing to comfort she'd felt in weeks. I'm sorry about your wife. I'm telling you this for a reason. He turned to face her. Under the hospital lights, the scar along his jaw was a thin white line, almost delicate. His features were angular, high cheekbones, narrow nose. The kind of face that would look severe if not for the exhaustion softening it. He was 41, maybe 42, salt and pepper was starting at his temples. My daughter needs someone permanent. Not someone who can leave when the job gets hard or the boyfriend complains. Not someone I can fire, and not someone who can fire me. She needs someone with medical knowledge who will be there every morning and every night. Someone she can attach to without the risk of that person walking away. You're talking about a mother, Zara said. I'm talking about a wife. The hallway went silent. Even the monitors seemed to pause. You're proposing marriage, Zara said carefully, to a woman you met 3 hours ago in your kitchen while she was begging for a dishwashing job. I'm proposing a partnership. He set his coffee on the arm of the chair. You have medical training that my daughter needs to survive. I have resources you currently do not have. My daughter needs stability. You need, if you'll forgive me for being direct, everything. A home, income, healthcare, legal standing. I can provide all of it immediately. And what do you get? A wife who can keep my daughter alive when her throat closes or her sugar drops. A partner who appears at functions and provides the stability my business requires. A permanent presence in my home who isn't there because I'm paying her a salary she can walk away from. Zara stared at him. You don't know anything about me. You're a nurse who lost her license. Not through incompetence. Tonight proved that. Someone took something from you.
You're living on the street and you haven't eaten properly in weeks. But your hands were steady when you administered that EpiPen, which tells me that whatever happened to you didn't break the part of you that matters. I know enough. How do you know about my license? I made a call while you were with Yuna. He said this without apology.
I needed to understand who was treating my daughter. The casual admission that he could pull someone's entire history with a phone call at 11 at night should have scared her. It did scare her, but it also confirmed something she'd been suspecting since the ambulance. Jae-sun was not a restaurant owner. Or not just a restaurant owner. What exactly is your business? Zara asked. His eyes held hers. I think you already know. I want to hear you say it. I run operations for the Park family. Import, export, real estate, restaurants. Some of those operations are legal, some are not. I'm telling you this because if you agree to what I'm proposing, you need to understand what you're walking into. I won't insult you by lying. Zara's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. You're in the mob. The Kangpe, Korean organized crime. My father built the American side of the business from this city 30 years ago. I inherited it. It's not what I would have chosen, but it's what I have. He paused. I'm also telling you that no part of this arrangement would involve you in that world. You would be Yuna's mother and my wife, not an accessory to my business. And if I say no? Then I'll have someone drive you wherever you want to go, and I'll give you enough money to get back on your feet. You saved my daughter's life. That debt has no expiration. Zara looked down the hallway toward Yuna's room. Through the glass partition, she could see the girl's small shape under the blankets, the blink of the heart monitor, the IV stand like a metal sentinel. I have conditions, Zara said. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise, more like the satisfaction of someone whose calculation had been correct. Tell me. I want my own room, my own space. This is a partnership, not that. Not until I decide otherwise, if I ever do. Agreed. I want Yuna to know the truth about our arrangement when she's old enough to understand. He hesitated for the first time. Agreed. When she's old enough. I want access to a lawyer, my own lawyer, not yours, to review whatever legal documents this involves. I'll have 3 attorneys' names for you by morning. You choose. And I want the chance to get my nursing license back. Whatever that takes. Lawyers, appeals, new hearings. I want that to be part of this. Jae-sun tilted his head. The gesture was slight, almost imperceptible, but it changed his entire expression, like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a solution to his problem, but as a person who had her own war to fight. Agreed, he said. I'll make sure you have every resource you need. Zara set down her coffee. Then I need 24 hours. For what? To decide if I've lost my mind. Fair. I'll have a room prepared for you at the 4 Seasons. Clean clothes, food, anything you need. Take your 24 hours. Zara stood, her knees were stiff. Her clothes were still damp. She smelled like rain and alley and hospital, and she was about to walk out of this building toward a car that would take her to a hotel suite paid for by a Korean crime boss who wanted to marry her. Zara. She stopped at the hallway's end. Jae-sun was still sitting in the plastic chair, long legs stretched out, looking at her. Why didn't you walk away tonight? When the door was locked. You could have kept walking. Because a child was choking. Most people would have called for help. You kicked the door down. Zara held his gaze. I stopped being most people a long time ago. She walked away.
Behind her, she heard him exhale, a long, slow breath, like a man setting down something heavy. The hotel room had white sheets so clean they felt like an insult. Zara stood in the bathroom doorway in a robe that cost more than her last month's rent, and stared at the woman in the mirror. Wet twists pulled back from a face that had thinned too much in the past 8 months. Sharp cheekbones her mother used to call her inheritance from the Caldwell side. Dark circles under eyes the color of black coffee.
She looked like a before photo in a documentary about poverty. She ate everything on the room service tray. Grilled salmon, rice, steamed vegetables, bread with real butter, and then threw up half of it because her stomach had shrunk past the point of handling a full meal. She ate the other half more slowly, in small bites, sitting on the bathroom floor because the bed felt too soft and too much, and she didn't want to cry on those ridiculous white sheets. At 2 a.m, she called the only person she still trusted. Zara? Her older brother Kendrick's voice was thick with sleep. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm at the Four Seasons in Buckhead." A long silence. "You're where?" She told him. All of it. The restaurant, the rain, Yuna, the EpiPen, the ambulance, the proposal. When she finished, Kendrick was quiet for so long, she checked to see if the call had dropped. "He's Korean Mafia," Kendrick said. "Zara, he's literally a crime boss." "I know. And he wants to marry you. After 3 hours. He wants a mother for his daughter. The marriage is a framework." A framework. Zara, listen to yourself. You sound like you're negotiating a lease, not talking about marrying a stranger. "What's the alternative, Kendrick?" Her voice cracked for the first time. She pressed her palm over her mouth, held it there until the shaking stopped. "I slept in a parking garage last night. The night before that, a bus station. I can't get work because the revocation follows me everywhere. No one hires a nurse who killed a patient. Even though I didn't. Even though Felicia Grant." She stopped, breathed. "He has a little girl who almost died tonight because nobody around her knew what to do. I knew. I was the only person in that room who could save her. And he's offering me a chance to have a home, to fight for my license, to actually live again. What am I supposed to say to that?" "You're supposed to say no and come stay with me in Charlotte. Your apartment has 1 bedroom and your girlfriend already thinks I'm a disaster." Desiree doesn't. She does. And she's not wrong. Zara leaned her head against the bathroom wall. "I need you to hear me, Kenny. I've thought about this from every angle. This man is dangerous. But he was honest about that. He didn't sugarcoat what he is or what he does. He told me the truth and let me decide. When was the last time anyone in my life did that?" Kendrick was quiet again. She could hear Desiree shifting in the background, murmuring a question. "If he hurts you," Kendrick said slowly, "if he touches you, if he does anything. He agreed to separate bedrooms. He agreed to my own lawyer. He agreed to help me fight for my license. And Kendrick, his daughter held my wrist in that ambulance and didn't let go. She held on to me like I was the only solid thing she had. You always did save the broken ones. Maybe this time the broken one is me." At 9 the next morning, a woman named Mrs. Cho arrived at the hotel room with 2 garment bags. She was 60-something, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and the brisk efficiency of someone who had been organizing other people's lives for decades. She laid out the clothes without commentary: a simple navy dress, low heels, a coat that fit like it had been measured for Zara's body overnight. Because it probably had been. "Mr. Park would like to know your decision," Mrs. Cho said, folding the garment bags with surgical precision. "He's at the hospital with Yuna." Zara looked at the clothes. The navy dress was modest and well-made. Not flashy, Not seductive. Practical. As if whoever had chosen it understood that Zara needed to feel like herself, not like a costume. "Tell him I'll be there in an hour," Zara said. At Eggleston, Yuna was sitting up in bed, eating applesauce and watching cartoons on a tablet propped against her knees. The hives were gone. Her color was good. She looked up when Zara walked in, and her face did something that hit Zara square in the chest. It lit up. "Zara!" The girl reached for her with both arms, forgetting the IV taped to her hand and wincing when the line pulled. Zara gently adjusted the tubing and let Yuna wrap her arms around her neck. "Careful, baby. Easy with that hand." "You came back. Daddy said you might not come back." Zara looked over Yuna's head. Jae-sun stood by the window in a charcoal suit, his hands in his pockets. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes, fixed on his daughter's arms around Zara's neck, held something raw and unprotected. "I came back," Zara said, to Yuna and to him. Jae-sun nodded once, just once, but his shoulders dropped a fraction, as though he'd been bracing for a blow that didn't land. The paperwork took 4 days. Jae-sun's attorney drew up a prenuptial agreement that Zara's own lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Okonkwo she'd chosen from the 3 names provided, reviewed and negotiated with what Zara could only describe as ferocious attention to detail. Patricia added clauses Zara hadn't thought of: separate financial accounts in Zara's name, a guaranteed exit fund regardless of circumstances, full legal custody rights that would survive a divorce, and a provision stating that Zara could never be compelled to participate in or conceal criminal activity. "This man is giving you everything you asked for and more," Patricia told her over the phone. "Either he genuinely wants a partnership, or this is the most elaborate trap I've ever seen. For what it's worth, the prenup protects you thoroughly." The wedding happened on a Thursday morning in the living room of Park Jae-sun's penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor of a Buckhead high-rise. The space was enormous and cold. Grey marble floors, black leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. It looked like a place where deals were made, not where a family lived. Yuna was the flower girl. She wore a pink dress and threw petals she'd pulled from an arrangement in the lobby, giggling as they scattered across the marble. The officiant was a retired judge who owed Jae-sun a favor. The witnesses were Victor Hale, Jae-sun's right-hand man, a broad-shouldered white man with a military buzz cut and watchful eyes, and Mrs. Cho. Jae-sun wore a dark navy suit. Zara wore the dress Mrs. Cho had brought to the hotel. They stood facing each other in front of windows streaked with Atlanta rain, and when the judge asked if she took this man, Zara said, "I do," with a steadiness that surprised even her. Jae-sun said the same words. His voice didn't waver either. But when he slid the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band, no diamond, his thumb pressed briefly against her pulse point, and she felt the slight tremor in his touch. After the ceremony, Yuna grabbed Zara's hand with one fist and Jae-sun's with the other. "Now Zara stays forever?" Yuna asked, looking up at her father. Jae-sun's jaw tightened. He looked at Zara over his daughter's head, and for a moment, the mask of control he wore like armor slipped just enough for her to see what was underneath. Fear. Hope. And something else she couldn't name. "Yes," he told his daughter. "Zara stays." One person was missing from the ceremony. Park Soon-hee, Jae-sun's mother, had refused to attend. But later that evening, when Zara was unpacking her single bag of donated clothes into the guest bedroom Jae-sun had prepared for her, she found a note slid under her door. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, the English precise and formal. "My son has made decisions I cannot support before. This is the worst. You will fail. And when you do, I will be waiting." Zara read the note twice. Then she folded it, placed it in the bedside drawer, and went to check Yuna's blood sugar before bed. 212. She adjusted the insulin, waited for it to drop below 180, and sat beside the sleeping girl until her breathing was deep and even. "Thale," the note said. The woman didn't know Zara, didn't know that she'd walked 7 miles through a January night to take the NCLEX. Didn't know she'd held a man's severed artery together with her bare hands for 9 minutes while the OR was prepped. Didn't know that the only reason Zara had lost her license was because she'd refused to let someone else's mistake kill her sense of who she was. Park Soon-hee would learn. The penthouse had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen designed for a chef who was never there, and a silence that pressed against the walls like something living. Zara learned this in the first week. She learned that Jae-sun left before 6 every morning and returned after 9 most nights. She learned that Victor Hale sat in a black SUV in the parking garage for 12 hours a day and was replaced by another man for the other 12. She learned that Mrs. Cho ran the household with invisible efficiency. Groceries appeared, laundry vanished and returned folded, surfaces gleamed, and that disrupting Mrs. Cho's system was the fastest way to see genuine human emotion cross the woman's face. But mostly, in that first week, Zara learned Yuna. The girl was a contradiction wrapped in a 5-year-old body. She was fierce and fragile in alternating breaths. She could throw a tantrum about socks that lasted 40 minutes, then sit perfectly still for an insulin injection without flinching. She spoke English with an Atlanta accent she'd absorbed from television, and Korean with the fluency of a child raised by a grandmother who refused to speak anything else. She had opinions about everything. The correct ratio of chocolate chips to batter in pancakes, more chips than batter. The appropriate bedtime for someone who was almost 6, never. The relative merits of purple versus pink. Purple wins in every scenario except tutus. She also had a body that was trying to kill her on a daily basis. The type 1 diabetes required constant monitoring. Zara checked her blood sugar before meals, after meals, before bed, and at 2 in the morning when the risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia was highest. The food allergies, tree nuts, shellfish, sesame, meant reading every label, calling every restaurant, carrying EpiPens the way other parents carried wet wipes. Yuna wore a medical alert bracelet on her left wrist that she decorated with tiny stickers because she said the plain silver was boring. On the 3rd morning, Zara reorganized the kitchen. She removed every product containing tree nuts, shellfish, or sesame. She labeled shelves. She created a binder. Emergency protocols, Dr. Kwan's number, correction factors, carb ratios, a list of safe foods and restaurants. Mrs. Cho watched from the doorway with the expression of someone witnessing a coup. "I've managed this kitchen for 6 years," Mrs. Cho said, "and I'm sure you've done a beautiful job. But sesame oil was in the cabinet next to Yuna's snack shelf, and the EpiPen in the hallway closet was expired. The one in her school bag expires next month." Zara taped the emergency protocol sheet to the inside of the pantry door. "Yuna almost died 8 days ago because of a cross-contamination. That doesn't happen again." Mrs. Cho's mouth thinned. Then, slowly, she nodded. The expired pen was my oversight. It won't happen again. She paused. The binder is thorough. Thank you. It was the beginning of a truce that would take months to become something warmer, but in that moment, it was enough. Jae-sun was a ghost. He occupied the penthouse the way weather occupies a forecast. His presence was implied more than experienced. Zara would find evidence of him, a coffee cup in the sink at 5:30 in the morning, suit jackets hung over the dining chair, the faint scent of cedar and tobacco that clung to the hallway after he'd passed through. They communicated through logistics. A note on the counter, Yuna's school pickup is at 3, I've arranged a driver. A text at noon, meeting runs late, won't be home for dinner, give Yuna my love. Brief, efficient, impersonal. Two strangers managing a shared project. On the 10th night, Zara was in the kitchen at midnight making chamomile tea when she heard the front door open. She expected the usual sequence. Keys on the entry table, shoes removed, the soft pad of socked feet past the kitchen toward the master bedroom. Instead, he appeared in the kitchen doorway. Still in his suit, but the jacket was gone, sleeves rolled to the elbows, tie loosened. The scar on his jaw caught the under-cabinet lighting. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. "You're up," he said. "Yuna's 2 a.m. check isn't far off. Easier to stay up." He opened the refrigerator, stood there looking into it the way men do when they don't actually know what they want, closed it, opened the cabinet, took down a glass. "There's stew in the blue container on the second shelf," Zara said. "I made extra." He paused. "You cook." "I eat. Cooking is a side effect." Something twitched at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, the suggestion of one, killed before it could fully form. He took out the container, opened it, and the smell of braised beef and root vegetables filled the kitchen. "Yuna told me you rearranged the kitchen," he said, spooning stew into a bowl. "I reorganized for her safety. She also told me you let her paint your toenails." Zara looked down at her feet. Her toenails were a violent shade of purple with tiny silver stars that Yuna had applied with the concentration of a neurosurgeon. She was very persuasive. He put the bowl in the microwave, leaned against the counter, crossed his arms. For the first time since the ambulance, he looked at her not as a solution or a transaction, but as a person standing in his kitchen at midnight with purple toenails and a cup of chamomile tea. "My mother called today," he said. Zara's fingers tightened around her mug. "And?" "She wants to meet you. Formally." The note she left suggested she's already formed her opinion. His eyes sharpened. "What note?" Zara told him. The elegant handwriting, the prediction of failure, the promise to be waiting. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscles jump. "I'll speak to her." "Don't." Zara set down her tea. "Don't fight that battle for me. If your mother has a problem with this arrangement, I'll handle it myself." "You don't know my mother." "I know women who think they can break other women with a look and a well-placed sentence. I grew up in Vine City, Jae-sun. Your mother's disapproval is not the scariest thing I've survived this year." He studied her. The microwave beeped. Neither of them moved. "You called me Jae-sun," he said. She blinked, she had. Until now, she'd been avoiding his name entirely. Referring to him as your father, to Yuna, Mr. Park, to Mrs. Cho. Using his first name felt like crossing a line she hadn't meant to approach. Is that a problem? No. He took his bowl from the microwave, steam curled between them. It's the first time you've said it. I wanted to notice. He sat at the kitchen island and ate her stew without speaking. Zara finished her tea.
The silence between them was different from the silence of the penthouse. The penthouse silence was empty. This silence had texture. When he finished, he washed his own bowl. Dried it. Put it away.
Zara watched his hands. Large, scarred across the knuckles, meticulous in the simple task of drying a ceramic bowl. "The stew was very good," he said. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He walked toward the hallway, then stopped, half-turned. "Zara." "Yes?" "I'm glad you stayed." He disappeared into the dark hallway before she could respond. She sat in the kitchen for another 20 minutes, listening to the rain against the windows, wondering exactly when this arrangement had started feeling like something else. At 2 a.m., she checked Yuna's blood sugar. 106. Perfect range. The girl was sleeping with her arms flung wide, mouth open, the medical bracelet glinting in the nightlight's glow. Zara adjusted her blanket, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and felt the familiar ache of loving a child who wasn't biologically hers, but who had claimed her anyway. Park Soon-hee arrived on a Saturday morning without warning, which was absolutely a warning. She brought her own tea set, her own driver, and an expression that could have flash-frozen the Atlanta humidity. She was 68, small, immaculate. Silver hair in a chignon so precise it looked architectural. She wore a cream silk blouse, tailored black pants, and a jade pendant that rested against her collarbone. Everything about her communicated a lifetime of control over her appearance, her household, her son, her world. Zara was in the living room teaching Yuna to braid friendship bracelets when Soon-hee walked through the door. Yuna screamed, "How many?" and launched herself at her grandmother. Soon-hee caught her with practiced ease, and for exactly 3 seconds, the severity melted into something soft and fierce and private. Then she looked up, and the softness vanished. "So," Soon-hee said in English so precise it sounded rehearsed, "you are the woman my son married." "I am," Zara stood. She'd chosen her clothes carefully that morning. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, her natural twists pulled back with a silk scarf. She wasn't performing for this woman, but she wasn't going to be caught in pajamas either. "It's good to meet you, Mrs. Park." "It is not good." Soon-hee set Yuna down and smoothed the girl's hair with automatic tenderness. "But it is necessary. Yuna, go play in your room." "But Harmony, Zara's teaching me." "Now, child." Yuna looked at Zara. It was the look of a child checking whether the adult she trusts confirms the instruction. Zara nodded. "Go ahead, baby. I'll be right here." Yuna left reluctantly. Soon-hee watched the interaction with eyes that missed nothing. "She listens to you," Soon-hee said. It was not a compliment. "She trusts me." She trusted her last 3 nannies too. Children attach. It is what they do. It means nothing about whether you deserve it. The words were precise cuts, delivered without heat, clinical. Zara recognized the technique. It was how attending physicians dismantled residents who stepped out of line. Not with anger, but with the cold suggestion that your existence was an inconvenience they were tolerating. "I'm not a nanny," Zara said evenly. "I'm your son's wife." "You are a stranger he collected off the street because his daughter had an allergic reaction." "You are a nurse without a license, a woman without a family name I can trace. Without property, without connections. In Korea, this marriage would not be recognized. In my family, it is not recognized. With respect, Mrs. Park, your family's recognition isn't what keeps your granddaughter's blood sugar in range at 2 in the morning." Soon-hee's chin lifted a fraction, the jade pendant caught the light. "You think medical competence makes you suitable for my son?"
I think medical competence makes me necessary for your granddaughter. The marriage makes it permanent. Your son understood that. I understood that. The only person who seems confused is you. The air between them could have shattered glass.
Sunhee's eyes were dark and steady, and ancient with a kind of authority that came from decades of running a family that operated outside the law. My son is lonely, Sunhee said. Lonely men make foolish choices. He lost his wife and he never recovered, and now he's trying to fill that void with a convenient solution. You are convenient, nothing more. Zara held the woman's gaze. Maybe, but convenience that saves your granddaughter's life every day doesn't sound like something you should be fighting. Sunhee picked up her tea set from the entry table. I will make tea. You may join me, or you may leave the room. I don't care which. I'll join you. They drank tea in the kitchen. Sunhee brewed it with ritual precision. Loose-leaf oolong in a clay pot, water at exactly the right temperature, poured in a circular motion Zara had never seen before. The tea was exceptional. Zara said so. My mother taught me, Sunhee said. Then she caught herself, as if she hadn't meant to share something personal. She changed the subject. How is Yuna's hemoglobin A1C? 6.8, down from 7.3 before I arrived. Sunhee's hands paused on the teapot. That is a significant improvement. I adjusted her carb counting protocol and changed her bedtime snack. She was going too high overnight and crashing in the morning. Simple fix, but it required consistent monitoring. The nannies were not consistent. No. And you are? I check her at 2 a.m. every night. I haven't missed once. Sunhee poured another cup of tea. Her hands were elegant, the fingers long and tapered, moving with a grace that reminded Zara suddenly and painfully of her own mother. I will visit every Saturday, Sunhee announced. I will bring lunch. I will spend time with my granddaughter. And I will be watching you. I'd expect nothing less. Sunhee looked at her. Something in her expression shifted. Not softened, not warmed, but recalibrated. The way someone adjusts their assessment when the target proves harder to hit than expected. You are not what I expected, Sunhee said. What did you expect? Someone who would cry. She gathered her tea set. You do not cry. Not where people can see. Something flickered across the older woman's face. It was gone before Zara could name it. But it left a residue, like the afterimage of a camera flash. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of respect. That night, Jae-sun came home at 8, early for him, and found Zara on the living room floor with Yuna, assembling a puzzle of the solar system. He stood in the doorway for a full minute before they noticed him. My mother came today, he said. She did. Are you all right? I'm fine. She's formidable. She made grown men in the Kangpei cry. I believe it. Zara placed Saturn into its orbit. She's also terrified. My mother is not afraid of anything. She's afraid of losing Yuna. She's afraid you've made a choice she can't control. She's afraid that a stranger has more access to her granddaughter than she does. That's not hostility, Jae-sun. That's love wearing armor. He was quiet for a long time. Yuna placed Jupiter and cheered. How do you do that? He asked. Do what? See people so clearly. Zara looked up at him. The hallway light was behind him, casting his face in shadow, but she could see his eyes. They were watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with Yuna, or his mother, or the arrangement. It's what nurses do, she said. We see what's underneath. Yuna tugged Zara's sleeve. Where does Pluto go? Pluto's not a planet anymore, baby. That's not fair. Pluto didn't do anything wrong. Zara smiled. You're right. It didn't. She put Pluto on the puzzle anyway, outside the orbit line, because some things deserve a place even when the system says they don't belong. The discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon, which made sense because the worst revelations never have the decency to happen on a day you're prepared for. Zara was in Jae-sun's study looking for Yuna's vaccination records. Mrs. Cho had mentioned a filing cabinet behind the desk, and Zara opened the wrong drawer. Instead of medical files, she found a folder labeled Hail, Weekly. Inside were printed reports, surveillance photos, names she didn't recognize alongside addresses and dollar amounts, movement logs tracking people across the city, who met whom, where, when. She closed the folder, opened the correct drawer, found Yuna's vaccination records, took them, walked out of the study and closed the door behind her. Her hands didn't shake, but her heart was doing something fast and irregular against her ribs, and she stood in the hallway for a full minute with her back against the wall, staring at nothing. She'd known. He'd told her. Korean organized crime. Import, export, real estate. Some legal, some not. She'd understood the words when he'd said them in the hospital hallway. But words and reality are different animals. Words are abstract. A surveillance folder with photos of real people being tracked across a real city. That was concrete. That was a door she couldn't unknow was open. She didn't bring it up. Not that day. Not that week. But something in her shifted. A recalibration of the space she occupied in this penthouse, in this marriage. She started noticing things she'd been choosing not to see. The phone calls Jae-sun took in Korean behind closed doors. His voice dropping into a register she'd never heard. Flat, hard, stripped of the careful politeness he used in English. The men who came and went through the service entrance, always at odd hours, always leaving with envelopes or briefcases. The way Victor Hale's eyes swept every room before Jae-sun entered. The way his hand rested near his hip in a gesture that was the opposite of casual. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the filing cabinet, Jae-sun came home with blood on his shirt cuff. Not a lot, just a thin stripe along the edge of the white cotton, partially hidden by his suit sleeve. He might not have noticed it, but Zara noticed it the way she noticed pulse rates and pupil dilation, and the specific shade of blue a child's lips turn during anaphylaxis, automatically, involuntarily, without deciding to look. She waited until Yuna was asleep. Then she knocked on his bedroom door. He opened it in a gray t-shirt and dark pants, barefoot, his hair damp from the shower. Without the suit, he looked different, less constructed, more human. The scar on his jaw was stark against clean skin. There's blood on the shirt cuff you left in the laundry basket, Zara said. His expression didn't change. It's been handled. That's not what I asked. You didn't ask a question. Here's one. Is the person whose blood that is alive? A muscle tightened along his jaw. Yes. Are they going to stay alive? That depends on choices they make, not choices I make. Zara leaned against the doorframe. Her arms were crossed. Her pulse was elevated, but her voice was steady. The same steadiness she'd used in trauma bays when everything was falling apart, and the only useful response was precision. I need to understand the rules, she said. Not the details. I don't want the details. But I need to know the lines. What comes into this house and what doesn't?
What touches Yuna's life and what stays outside these walls? Jae-sun looked at her for a long time. Then he stepped back from the doorway, not inviting her in, creating space. The distinction mattered. "Nothing touches Yuna," he said. "Nothing touches you. The business operates from 3 locations, none of which are connected to this address. The men you've seen come through the service entrance are couriers. They deliver reports, financial mostly, never product, never weapons. Never anything that would create legal exposure for this household. The surveillance folder in your study." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You found that?" "I was looking for vaccination records." He exhaled through his nose. "That was careless of me. It won't happen again. I'm not asking you to hide better, I'm asking you to keep your promise."
You said this wouldn't touch me or Yuna. I'm holding you to that. You have my word. Your word is the only currency I can spend here, Jae-sun. If it bounces, we're done. Something moved across his face, not anger. Something that looked, improbably, like admiration. "It won't bounce." She held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she turned and walked back to her room. Behind her, she heard his door close, and the quiet click of the lock engaging. That Saturday, soon he arrived with her tea set and a container of homemade kimchi jjigae. She set the stew on the counter and looked at Zara with the evaluating stare that had become their standard greeting. "You look tired," soon he said. Yuna had a low at 3 a.m., took an hour to stabilize. "How low?" 54. Soon-hee's hands stilled on the tea set. 54 was dangerous for a child. Below 54 was seizure territory. What did you do? Glucose tabs first, then half a juice box. Rechecked at 15 minutes, 68. Rechecked at 30, 89. Gave her a small snack with protein and fat to hold her steady. Stayed with her until 5. And my son? He wasn't home. The words sat between them. Soon-hee's mouth tightened, and for the first time, the tightening wasn't directed at Zara. It was directed at the empty space where her son should have been, at 3 in the morning when his daughter's blood sugar dropped to 54. "He works," Soon-hee said. But the defense was thin. "He does, and I handle the rest. That was the agreement." Soon-hee poured tea. Her movements were slower today, more deliberate. She placed a cup in front of Zara without being asked. The first time she'd served Zara rather than simply allowing her to pour her own. "My husband was the same," Soon-hee said quietly. "Gone more than present. The business consumed him. I raised Jae-sun essentially alone." It was the first personal thing Soon-hee had ever shared. Zara recognized the weight of it, how much it cost a woman like this to offer a piece of herself. "Was it worth it?" Zara asked. "That is a question I have been asking for 40 years. Soon-hee sipped her tea. "I still don't have an answer." They drank tea in silence, but it was a different silence than before. The kind that forms between 2 women who have just acknowledged, without saying it directly, that they understand each other better than either of them planned. The shift happened at the museum. A Sunday afternoon in late October, 3 months into the marriage. Jae-sun had the day free, a rarity that Mrs. Cho had circled on the kitchen calendar with a red marker, as though documenting an eclipse. The High Museum of Art was hosting a Korean contemporary art exhibition, and Yuna had been begging to go because her kindergarten class had talked about museums, and she was desperate to report back that she'd visited one. Jae-sun drove them himself, which Zara learned was unusual when Victor Hale followed in the SUV behind them with an expression of professional unhappiness. At the museum, something unexpected happened. Jae-sun came alive. He moved through the galleries with a knowledge that startled Zara. He knew the artists. He knew the movements, the histories, the techniques. He stood in front of a ceramic installation by a sculptor Zara had never heard of and explained, to Yuna, who was more interested in the museum gift shop, how the glaze technique was 800 years old and had nearly been lost during the Japanese occupation. "My mother taught me," he said, when he caught Zara watching him. "Before the business. She was an art history student at Ewha University. She gave it up when she married my father. She could have gone back. By the time she could have, she'd convinced herself she didn't want to anymore. That's what sacrifice does. It rewrites the story until you believe you chose it." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Zara felt it land somewhere in her chest, near the place where she kept the things she didn't talk about. Her own sacrifice, her own rewritten story, the nursing career that had been taken from her, and the version of herself she'd built to survive the taking. Yuna pulled them toward a room of large-scale photographs. One image stopped all three of them. It was a photograph of a woman standing in a rice paddy at dawn, her back to the camera, her hands at her sides. The light was extraordinary, golden, almost liquid, pouring over the water and the woman's shoulders like something holy. "She looks lonely," Yuna said. "She looks free," Zara said. "She looks both," Jae-sun said. And then he looked at Zara with an expression she hadn't seen before. It was open, unguarded. The kind of look a person gives when they've been carrying something alone for so long that seeing someone else understand it feels like setting down a physical weight. "Are you lonely?" he asked. The question was quiet. Yuna had wandered to the next photograph, out of earshot but within sight. Zara considered lying, considered deflecting, considered the dozen safe responses she could deploy to maintain the professional distance of their arrangement. "Sometimes," she said. "Are you?" "All the time." They stood in front of the photograph of the woman in the rice paddy, and something between them shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or sudden declarations. It shifted the way tectonic plates shift, slowly, deep underground, changing the landscape above so gradually that you don't notice until you look up one day and realize the mountains are in different places. That evening, after Yuna was asleep, Jae-sun didn't disappear into his bedroom. He sat in the living room with a glass of scotch and a book, a Korean translation of a novel Zara recognized. She sat on the opposite end of the couch with her own book, a battered copy of Song of Solomon she'd found in a used bookstore the week before. They read in silence for 2 hours. At 10, Jae-sun set his book down. "What are you reading?" he asked. She showed him the cover. He took the book, turned it over, read the back. "Toni Morrison," he said. "My wife, Mi Young. She loved Morrison. Beloved was her favorite." It was the first time he'd mentioned his dead wife by name since the hospital hallway. Zara received the name carefully, the way she'd receive a fragile instrument. "Your mother mentioned she studied at Ewha." "Mi Young?" "No, Mi Young studied music. She played the gayagum, traditional Korean string instrument. She was extraordinary." He paused. "Yuna doesn't remember her." "She will, through you." "Through us," he corrected, then caught himself. The word hung in the air, us, heavier than he'd intended. Zara closed her book. "Jae-sun." "I know," he rubbed his face with one hand. "I know what this is. I know the terms we agreed to. I'm not trying to, I wasn't going to say stop." He went still. "I was going to say that I check your daughter's blood sugar at 2 in the morning because I love her. Not because of our agreement. That stopped being the reason about 6 weeks in."
And I sit in this kitchen at midnight waiting for you to come home, not because I'm doing a job, but because. She stopped. Breathed. Because I worry about the blood on your shirt cuff. I worry about the phone calls in Korean.
I worry about the fact that Victor Hale carries a weapon under his jacket and follows you everywhere. I worry about you, and that wasn't part of the arrangement. Jae-sun set down his scotch. He turned to face her fully, one leg folded on the couch, his arm along the backrest. The distance between them was 3 feet of Italian leather cushion. It felt like nothing. It felt like everything. What are you saying, Zara? I'm saying the arrangement is changing, for me. And I need to know if it's changing for you too, or if I'm the only one standing in a different place than where we started. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His fingers were warm and rough, and they closed around hers with a gentleness that seemed impossible in hands that she knew had done things she would never ask about. I have been standing in a different place for weeks, he said. I just didn't know how to tell you without breaking what we'd built. Zara looked at their hands, his tanned skin against her brown skin, his scarred knuckles against her nurse's fingers. 2 people who had entered a contract and found something inside it that neither of them had included in the terms. Then we renegotiate, she said. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, brief, formal, almost old-fashioned. But his eyes above her hand were anything but formal. They were dark and full and burning with something he'd been containing for longer than she'd realized. I don't want to renegotiate, he said against her skin. I want to start over, as something real. It was always real, Zara said. We just didn't call it that. He pulled her closer, slowly, giving her space to resist. She didn't resist. She leaned into him, and his arms came around her, and they sat like that for a long time. 2 people learning what it felt like to hold someone when the holding wasn't part of any agreement. When it was just 2 hearts tired of being alone in the same house, choosing, finally, to stop. Neither of them moved to the other's bedroom that night. That wasn't what this was yet. But when Zara went to check Yuna at 2 a.m., she found Jae-sun already there, sitting beside his daughter's bed in the dark, watching her breathe. Her sugar? He asked. I'll check. Zara sat on the other side of the bed, checked the glucometer. 112. Perfect. They sat on opposite sides of their sleeping daughter, and the penthouse that had been so cold and so silent for so long felt, for the first time, like something it had never been. It felt like home. The man appeared at Yuna's school. Mrs. Cho called Zara at 2:15 on a Wednesday. Her voice was controlled, but Zara had learned to read the tones beneath Mrs. Cho's control, and what she heard made her grab her coat and keys before the sentence was finished. A man approached Yuna at pickup. He spoke to her in Korean, said he was a friend of her father's. The teacher intervened because he wasn't on the authorized list, but Yuna is upset. Zara was in the car in 90 seconds. Victor Hale drove. He didn't ask questions. His jaw was set and his phone was already to his ear, speaking in clipped English to someone on the other end. At the school, Yuna was in the principal's office with her teacher, a young woman named Ms. Langford who looked shaken. Yuna ran to Zara and buried her face against her stomach. Her small body was trembling. He said Daddy owes people money, Yuna whispered. He said Daddy should be careful. Why would he say that? Daddy has lots of money. Zara knelt. Put both hands on Yuna's face. Looked directly into her eyes. Listen to me. Some people say things to scare other people. It doesn't mean those things are true. Your daddy is fine.
You're fine. I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere. Okay? Yuna nodded, but her eyes were too old for 5. They had seen something she shouldn't have had to see, that the world contained people who would use a child as a message. Zara took Yuna home, checked her blood sugar, 162, stress spikes glucose,
Gave her a small correction, and sat with her while she watched cartoons and ate apple slices with peanut-free sunflower butter. By the time Yuna fell asleep on the couch, Zara's rage had moved past the hot, explosive stage and into the cold, quiet place where it became useful. Jae-sun came home at 4:30, the earliest he'd ever arrived. His face was blank in the way that Zara had learned meant the opposite of calm. The blankness was a lid on something volcanic. Victor Hale was behind him, and behind Victor were 2 more men Zara had never seen, both in dark suits, both moving with the coiled readiness of people paid to be dangerous. "She's asleep," Zara said from the couch, Yuna's head in her lap. Jae-sun crossed the room. He looked down at his daughter. Then he closed his eyes, and for 3 seconds, the mask cracked. Zara saw the terror underneath. Raw, liquid, boundless. "His name is Kwon Tae-ho," Jae-sun said, his voice low enough not to wake Yuna. "He works for a faction in New York that wants to expand into Atlanta. This is a territorial dispute. He used my daughter to send a message." "What message?" "That they can reach me wherever I'm vulnerable." Zara's hand was resting on Yuna's hair. She kept her voice even. "And what message are you going to send back?" He looked at her. The volcanic blankness was still there, but underneath it, she saw something she hadn't expected. He was looking at her for guidance. Not tactical guidance. He had Victor and his men for that. Emotional guidance. He was looking at her the way a man looks at the person whose opinion matters more than anyone else's in the room. "I want to do something I'll regret," he said. "I know. Something that would put more blood on more shirt cuffs." "I know that too." "Tell me not to." Zara held his gaze. "I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. That's not our agreement, and it's not my place. But I will tell you this. Your daughter is 5 years old, and she just learned that someone wants to hurt her father. The thing she needs right now isn't revenge. It's you. Here. Present. Showing her that the people who tried to scare her don't have any power over this family." Jae-sun's hands were fists at his sides. She could see the tendons straining under his skin. The scar on his jaw was white with tension. "He approached my child," Jae-sun said. The words were barely audible. "And she's safe, because of the teacher you vetted. Because of the pickup protocols we established. Because of the security your people put in place. The system worked." The system shouldn't have been tested. No, it shouldn't have. But it was. "And your daughter is sleeping in my lap right now, healthy and safe, with her blood sugar at 104 because I just checked. That's what matters." He stood there for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sat on the floor beside the couch. Not on the cushion. On the floor. He leaned his head back against the couch near Yuna's feet, and Zara watched the tension drain from his body, not all of it, but enough. Enough for him to close his eyes. Enough for him to breathe. "Stay with her tonight," he said. "Both of us. I don't want her to wake up alone." "Okay." They stayed. Zara on the couch with Yuna's head in her lap. Jae-sun on the floor with his daughter's feet near his shoulder. Victor Hale in the hallway with a weapon Zara pretended she couldn't see. The penthouse locked, alarmed, guarded. At some point in the night, Jae-sun's hand found Zara's, where it hung over the edge of the couch.
His fingers laced through hers and held on. Zara squeezed back. In the dark, in the silence, with their daughter sleeping between them, they held on to each other, the way survivors hold on to wreckage, not gracefully, not romantically, but with the desperate grip of people who have found something worth not letting go. The situation with Kwon Tae-ho resolved within a week. Zara didn't ask how. She noticed that Jae-sun was home more, that the men in the service entrance came less frequently, that Victor Hale's perpetual tension eased by a fraction.
She noticed that Yuna's school now had a security guard she hadn't seen before, and that the man wore an earpiece. She noticed, she didn't ask, and Jae-sun didn't offer. This was the border they'd drawn between his world and theirs, and both of them honored it, because both of them understood that some doors, once opened, could never be closed. But something had changed. The threat had fused them. Where before they'd been two people in a shared arrangement, moving cautiously toward something more, they were now a unit, a family. The word felt strange and fragile and absolutely correct. 5 months into the marriage, on a cold night in January, Zara kissed Jae-sun for the first time. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't in the rain, it wasn't during a crisis or after a fight. It was in the kitchen at 11:30 at night. He'd come home late and she'd left stew on the stove because she'd learned that he forgot to eat when she didn't leave food out. He was standing at the counter, tie loosened, eating directly from the pot with a wooden spoon because he thought she was asleep and wouldn't catch him being undignified. She watched him from the hallway for 10 seconds. This man who controlled a criminal empire and ate leftover stew like a college student when he thought no one was looking. This man who'd held her hand in the dark while their daughter slept between them. This man who had started leaving books on her nightstand, Morrison novels, poetry collections, a nursing law textbook he'd found with pages marked at the sections on license reinstatement. He never mentioned the books, they just appeared. Quiet offerings from a man who didn't know how to say what he felt, but could find the exact right book to say it for him. She walked into the kitchen. He looked up, caught with the spoon halfway to his mouth. "I thought you were asleep," he said. She took the spoon from his hand, set it on the counter, put both hands on the lapels of his suit jacket, pulled him down to her, because he was 6'1" and she was 5'6", and the height difference required intention, and kissed him. He went completely still for 2 full seconds. Then his hands came to her waist, and he kissed her back with the controlled intensity of a man who had been waiting for permission and was now terrified of wanting too much too fast. His mouth was warm. He tasted like her stew and the scotch he drank alone in his study. His hands were shaking. She pulled back. His eyes were closed. When they opened, they were wet. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough. "For what?" "I don't know. Shaking. I don't shake." "You shook when you couldn't open the EpiPen." "That was different." "It was the same. Something matters enough to break through." She touched the scar on his jaw, traced it from his ear to his chin. He turned his face into her palm and stood there, this powerful, dangerous man, leaning into her hand like an animal starved for touch. "I wasn't supposed to feel this way about you," he said. "I wasn't supposed to feel this way about anyone, ever again. Plans change." She took his hand and led him out of the kitchen, down the hallway, past Yuna's room where the nightlight glowed purple through the cracked door, past the guest room where Zara had slept alone for 5 months, and into the master bedroom that Jae-sun had occupied alone for 5 years. She was nervous. So was he. But the nervousness was the good kind, the kind that comes from caring too much rather than too little. He was gentle in a way she hadn't expected. Careful. He asked permission with his eyes before every new touch. And when she said yes, with words, with her body, with the way she pulled him closer instead of pushing him away, his relief was so visible, it made her chest ache. Afterward, she lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers moved through her twists, careful not to pull, learning the texture. The scar on his jaw was smooth under her fingertips. "Ask me something," she said. "Anything." "What do you miss most about nursing?" The question surprised her. Not its content, but its precision. He'd aimed directly at the center of her. "The moment when you know," she said. "When a patient is crashing, and nothing is working, and everyone's panicking, and then suddenly you see it. The right intervention, the right drug, the right timing. And your hands just move. And the monitors change. And you've pulled someone back. That feeling, the knowing. I miss that every day. You'll get it back. You can't promise that. I can promise that I'll dismantle anyone who stands in the way of you getting it back." He said this without bravado, the way someone states a logistical fact. Zara propped herself on her elbow and looked at him. In the dark bedroom, his face was all angles and shadows. "Patricia, my lawyer, filed the appeal last month. We have a hearing in March." "I know. I've been following the case." "Of course you have." "Dr. Felicia Grant still works at Grady. She was promoted to department head 6 months after your dismissal. She drives a new Mercedes and recently purchased a house in Druid Hills that is significantly above her salary grade." Zara went cold. "How do you know that?" "Because when you told me what happened to you, I looked into it. The same way I look into anything that threatens someone I—" He stopped. Started again. "Someone I care about. Grant falsified documentation. She covered a medication error that killed a patient and let you take the fall. The evidence is there if someone knows where to look." "Jae-sun." She sat up. "Tell me you didn't." "Didn't what?" "Use your people to dig into this." "I had Victor pull public records and a few financial disclosures. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would compromise your case. But it could. If anyone found out that my husband had his people investigating the doctor who— No one will find out." "That's not the point." Her voice had risen. She caught it, brought it back down. "The point is that this is my fight. My license, my career, my name. If I get it back through anything other than the truth and the legal process, it means nothing." He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "You're right. I overstepped." "You did." "I won't do it again." "You will. Because you're you. But I'm telling you now, this one thing, this one fight, it has to be mine." He reached up and tucked a twist behind her ear. "Then it's yours. But I'll be in the courtroom. If you'll let me." "I'll let you." He pulled her back down beside him. They lay in the dark, and the penthouse that had been so cold for so long was warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, and everything to do with what two people can build when they stop pretending they don't need each other. At 2 a.m., they both got up to check Yuna's blood sugar. Standing on either side of their daughter's bed, Jae-sun held the flashlight while Zara pricked Yuna's finger. 109. Perfect. Yuna stirred, opened one eye, saw both of them. "Why are you both here?" "Checking your sugar, baby." Yuna looked from Zara to her father and back. Then she smiled. A sleepy, knowing 5-year-old smile, that suggested she understood more than either adult gave her credit for. "Good," she said, and went back to sleep. The hearing was in March, in a beige conference room at the Georgia Board of Nursing. Zara wore a black blazer Mrs. Cho had pressed with military precision, and the platinum wedding band she hadn't taken off since the day Jae-sun slid it onto her finger. Patricia Okonkwo presented the case with the surgical focus Zara had loved about her from the start. Documentation showing inconsistencies in the original investigation. Witness statements from 3 nurses who had been on shift the night Dolores Webb died, and who had been too afraid to speak at the original hearing, but had since come forward. A forensic analysis of the medication administration records, proving that the timestamp on Zara's supposed error was inconsistent with her charted location at that time. She'd been in a different wing of the hospital when the dosage was administered. The board members listened. They asked questions. They reviewed the evidence, and then they asked Zara to make a statement. She stood. Her hands were flat on the table. 11 years, she said. I gave 11 years to trauma nursing. I held a man's artery together with my bare hands for 9 minutes while the OR was prepped. I coded patients back to life in hallways because the rooms were full. I worked doubles and triples and came back the next day because people needed me. And then one doctor made a mistake, and instead of owning it, she pointed at me. And every person in that room looked at me. At my face, at my name, at my zip code, and decided I was the easier answer. She paused. The room was silent. Dolores Webb deserved better than to have her death used as a cover story. I deserved better than to lose my career protecting someone else's reputation. In every patient I could have helped in the past 9 months, they deserved better too. I'm asking this board to look at the evidence, not at me, at the evidence, because the evidence has always told the truth, even when the people involved didn't. She sat down. Jae-sun was in the back row. He hadn't moved during the entire hearing, but when Zara glanced at him, his eyes were bright, and the look on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. It was pride. Pure, unguarded, fierce pride in the woman he'd married. The board reinstated her license 3 weeks later. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which made sense because the best revelations, like the worst ones, never have the decency to happen on a day you're prepared for. Zara read it standing in the kitchen with Yuna on her hip and Jae-sun reading over her shoulder. When the words sank in, she didn't scream or cry or fall apart. She set Yuna down, put the letter on the counter, and walked to the bathroom, where she closed the door and sat on the tile floor and sobbed for 20 minutes. She cried for Dolores Webb. She cried for the 11 years she'd given. She cried for the 8 months she'd lost. She cried for the woman who'd stood outside a restaurant in the rain, begging for a dishwashing job, who had been so hungry and so broken and so close to the edge that a stranger's insane proposal had sounded like salvation. When she came out, Jae-sun was sitting on the hallway floor outside the bathroom door. He looked up at her with those dark eyes. "You didn't come in," she said. "You needed that to be yours." She held out her hand. He took it, stood. She pulled him against her and held on, and his arms wrapped around her, and they stood in the hallway of the penthouse that had become a home because 2 broken people had decided to stop being broken in the same direction and start building something instead. Zara went back to work at Grady Memorial in April. Different unit, new colleagues, same hospital where she'd lost everything. She walked through those doors with her badge and her scrubs and her nursing license reinstated, and the feeling she'd described to Jae-sun, the knowing, the rightness of her hands moving with purpose, flooded back like blood returning to a numb limb. She worked 3 12-hour shifts a week. On the other days, she was Yuna's mother. She checked blood sugars and packed allergy-safe lunches and sat through kindergarten recitals and painted toenails purple with silver stars. Yuna's A1C dropped to 6.4. Dr. Kwan called it the best management she'd seen in a pediatric patient in years. Soon-hee still came every Saturday with her tea set, but now she brought 2 kinds of kimchi, the regular and a mild version she'd developed specifically for Yuna's palate. She taught Zara to brew tea properly, correcting her water temperature with the exacting patience of a woman who had decided that if her son was going to marry this woman, the least she deserved was a daughter-in-law who didn't ruin oolong. On a Saturday in June, Soon-hee watched Zara prepare Yuna's insulin injection with the precision she'd come to expect. When Yuna ran off to play, Soon-hee set down her teacup.
"I was wrong about you," she said. Zara looked up. In 6 months, Soon-hee had never admitted to being wrong about anything. "You were protecting your family," Zara said. "I was being a fool. There is a difference." The older woman folded her hands. The jade pendant rested against her collarbone. "My son has not had nightmares since February." "Did you know he had nightmares?" "I know. For 5 years, since Myung died. Every week. Screaming in his sleep. And they stopped." Zara didn't know what to say to that. So she said nothing. "Thank you," Soon-hee said. The words seemed to cost her something physical. "For my son. For my granddaughter. For the 2 a.m. blood sugar checks. For the stew you leave on the stove.
For not running when you found out what this family is." She reached across the table and placed her hand over Zara's. Her skin was paper-thin and warm. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me." The years moved forward the way years do when they're full, quickly and without mercy. Yuna started 1st grade. Her diabetes management became routine, her allergies became a navigable landscape rather than a minefield. She called Zara Mama for the first time at the dinner table on a Wednesday night, casually, as though she'd been doing it forever, and Jae-sun had to leave the room because he didn't want his daughter to see him cry. Zara and Jae-sun's marriage, which had begun as a contract on a rainy night in a hospital hallway, became the kind of partnership that other people envied without understanding. They argued about loading the dishwasher and whose turn it was to do the 2 a.m. check. They slow danced in the kitchen to music playing from Jae-sun's phone. They read on opposite ends of the couch, feet tangled together, in a silence that felt like the most intimate conversation 2 people could have. In September, Zara told Jae-sun she was pregnant. He received the news in the living room, standing very still. And then he sat down on the floor. He always ended up on the floor when emotions overwhelmed his ability to remain upright, and put his face in his hands. "Are you happy?" Zara asked, kneeling beside him. He looked up. His eyes were wet. The scar on his jaw was white in the evening light. "I didn't think I'd get this," he said. "Any of this. I thought my life was going to be... I thought it was just going to be the business, and the loneliness, and trying to keep Yuna alive, and nothing else. And then you kicked down my door." "Your lock was cheap," he laughed. She'd never heard him laugh like that. Full, open, with his whole chest. She kissed him, and he pulled her into his lap on the living room floor, and Yuna found them like that 10 minutes later and demanded to know why they were being weird. The baby was a boy. They named him Dolores Webb Caldwell Park, Dolo for short, because Zara wanted the woman whose death had changed everything to be remembered for something other than a tragedy. Jae-sun agreed without hesitation. Soon-hee raised an eyebrow at the name, but said nothing, which was her version of enthusiastic approval. Dolo was born at Grady Memorial, delivered by colleagues who had watched Zara fight her way back and who cheered in the delivery room when the baby screamed his first breath. Jae-sun cut the cord with steady hands, no shaking this time. And then it was a year, and then 2, and then 5. Yuna turned 10, still fierce, still fragile, still wearing medical bracelets decorated with stickers. Dolo was a toddler with his mother's sharp cheekbones and his father's dark eyes and a personality that could fill any room he entered. On the 6th anniversary of their marriage, Jae-sun took Zara back to Hanu House. The restaurant had been remodeled, sleeker, warmer, the service entrance replaced with a proper door. They sat in the private dining room where Yuna had nearly died, where Zara had kicked down a door and saved a stranger's daughter and been offered an impossible choice. "I never asked you this," Jae-sun said, pouring her tea with the precision Soon-hee had taught him. "That night in the hospital, when I proposed. What made you say yes? Not the practical reasons, not the shelter or the resources. The real reason." Zara looked at him across the table. This man she'd married for survival and stayed for love. This man whose hands still shook when his children were sick. This man who left books on her nightstand and ate stew from the pot when he thought she wasn't watching. "You said please," she told him. "Twice. In the ambulance and at the hospital door. And the way you said it, like the word was a foreign language you were learning for the first time, told me that you weren't a man who asked for things. You took things, or you earned things, or you commanded things. But that night, for me, you asked. Twice." "And that was enough?" "That was everything." The rain came down outside the windows, the same rain that had been falling the night they met. But inside the room was warm, and the tea was good, and the man across from her was looking at her the way he'd looked at her in the ambulance, like she was an equation he'd never be able to solve, and he was grateful for the complexity. "Take me home," Zara said. He took her hand across the table. "Our home." "Our home," she agreed. They drove through the Atlanta rain, past the hospital where their son was born, past the school where their daughter learned, past the penthouse that had once been cold and empty and was now so full of life that some mornings the noise alone could wake the dead. 2 people who had started as strangers in a rainstorm. 2 people who had married for practical reasons and fell in love because love doesn't care about reasons. A Black woman from Vine City and a Korean man from a world she'd never imagined entering. A nurse who lost everything and found it again. A father who needed a wife more than a worker and got something he never knew how to ask for. They went home together. Subscribe and turn on notifications not to miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments and inspire others.